Hi, thank you for that introduction. I am Constance Li. In addition to the wonderful background that was provided, I am also co-founder of Hive, which is a community building organization for farmed animal advocates, and also founder of AI for Animals, which is a field building organization aiming to elevate the intersection of how AI would impact animals through networked leadership and events such as conferences and coalition building. So today we're going to have 4 different panelists. I'll give a brief overview of what each panelist will be talking about, and then I'll give my presentation. Each presentation will be about 10 minutes, and then we have some prepared Q&As, and then any Q&As that arise from the audience can be submitted through the Inventory app. So I'm going to start off talking about the role of AI in animal farming. Then Karol Orzechowski, the content director for Faunalytics, will be talking about strategic considerations for animal advocates when using AI. Yip Fai, who is research assistant to Professor Peter Singer at Princeton University, will be talking about catastrophic risks posed to animals through the use of AI. And then finally, Sam Tucker, who is the founder of Paws and Veg3, will be talking about influencing government and corporate AI policy through coalition building. Okay, give a round of applause. So, precision livestock farming. How many people in this room have heard of this term? Just a show of hands. Okay, that's a good chunk of people, maybe 50%. So what does precision livestock farming look like? It looks kind of like this. So it's a complex system of technologies that involves a lot of monitoring data that can be collected through cameras, through biosensors that the animals wear, through environmental sensors that can detect things in the air or the water like nitrogen level, and even audio recording equipment that can record vocalizations. And what it ends up giving is very accurate data about the animals and what they're doing, whether they're eating or not, how well they're gaining weight, if they're getting sick according to their body temperature or their heart rate. And you can see some examples of how it is applied for dairy cows and for pigs over here. So why does this matter for animal advocates? Well, right now, all of the asks that we have in campaigns are based off of welfare inputs. Now, these are the ingredients that are needed for good welfare, but are not necessarily representative of good welfare in and of themselves. So these are things like, are the birds in cages or not? Do they have enrichment in their living environment? And how much space does each bird get? As opposed to what we could be measuring with vast amounts of data, which is welfare outcomes. So these are things like what percentage of the birds end up dying? What frequency of natural behaviors are they showing in a certain given period of time? Or even things that seem a bit unintuitive to us for measuring welfare, such as their rate of blinking. And this is an actual study that came out of a university that did computer vision on chickens while they were subjected to stressful stimuli, such as the sound of a dog barking or an umbrella opening nearby, and they did detect that there was a significant decrease in the rate of blinking of chickens. So these are all things that we are just starting to understand about animal welfare outcomes. And what is the current state of precision livestock farming? Well, it is steadily growing, both in the amount of research that is out there in terms of papers published and also in capital investment. In fact, this field is growing by 10% in terms of investment every single year. It's mostly developed in the dairy industry where the cows are larger, so easier to detect on cameras, and also each animal is much more valuable. Whereas in the poultry and seafood industry, it's not as developed. These animals are smaller, harder to capture on camera, harder to put devices to monitor their biometrics on. And if they lose one or two animals, it's not that big of a deal to them. And there are two different goals that can be optimized for in precision livestock farming. There is efficiency, which is historically what has been optimized in animal agriculture. And this is to maximize the economic output, meaning the amount of milk or meat or money that can be squeezed out of an animal, and then minimize the input in terms of cost of feed and labor going into the system. Whereas, as animal advocates, we'd be interested in optimizing for animal welfare, maximizing the positive experiences of the animal and minimizing the negative experiences. Sometimes these two goals can go hand in hand, but oftentimes there are trade-offs. So in animal health, it's usually correlated with both efficiency and welfare. Say, for instance, we vaccinate an animal, they are more likely to survive until slaughter, and they're less likely to suffer from disease during their lifetime. Whereas there are things like keel bone fractures, where it's not significant enough that the animal is not able to get to food and water, but it is significant enough to cause the animal significant pain during its lifetime. And historically, like I said, economic pressures have prevailed, tipping the scales more in favor of efficiency. And regulatory and social pressures have largely allowed the economic pressures to take hold, which is how we have factory farms today. But I do believe that regulatory and social pressures can trend in favor of welfare, thanks in no small part to advocates such as yourselves. Now, to help us imagine what the scenarios would look like if we optimized for efficiency versus welfare, I'm going to take two hypothetical scenarios. One is poultry tech optimizing for efficiency, and the other one is chicken care, which will be an AI system that optimizes for welfare. So who develops each system? In poultry tech, Tyson Foods could come out with it. And so they have the first mover advantage, and they have the whole distribution chain to distribute the technology. And in chicken care, an animal welfare research lab comes out with it, such as the University of British Columbia Animal Welfare Program, which is a real program that does study precision livestock farming. In the poultry tech scenario, farmers would be required to purchase proprietary data or proprietary hardware from Tyson, and this would be a closed circuit system transmitting data directly from the farms to Tyson. Maybe they even have to pay a subscription for the software that they use, and no one else would have access to the data unless Tyson expressly permits it, and even if they release the data, it might be heavily redacted. Whereas in chicken care, maybe the scientists want more data to be transmitted to them so that they can improve their algorithms. They make the system open source and compatible with a wide range of devices. So essentially, this would be the difference between Lightning cables being compatible with iPhones and USB-C cables being compatible with literally every other device. And eventually, since we have all these monitoring systems on farms, people are going to want to know, how are these animals treated? Now, Tyson could say, oh, we could come out with our Poultry Tech Assured certification system. We'll put a rubber stamp on everything that passes our high standards. And these welfare standards could coincide with things that maximize productivity, such as mortality, growth, and disease rate. Whereas in chicken care, they might have a more nuanced system on a ranking of 1 to 5, so that companies can aspire to increase in their welfare ranking. And they may care about things that are more intrinsically valuable to the animals, such as pain signals and stress and play behaviors. Eventually, these algorithms are going to need to be updated. So in poultry tech, they may look at their numbers and say, oh, there's a couple of flags for welfare risks that are unnecessarily high and aren't affecting productivity. Let's reduce our system's sensitivity to that. And they might never have to even tell the public that they're making these changes. Whereas in chicken care, the researchers and policymakers can continually update the system as their scientific understanding grows. And they can get public commentary on it. There can even be conferences where people discuss the standards within the chicken care system. So what will come out of this? In poultry tech, the large farms will benefit, as they always do, from economies of scale. There may be further humane washing, and suffering will be largely invisible. And in the chicken care system, the high welfare farms will finally have an edge. Suffering can be transparent, and it can be penalized. So if you had Farm A that had a welfare ranking of 3, and then Farm B that had a welfare ranking of 5, then Farm A could learn management practices from Farm B, and they could aim to increase their welfare outcomes. You can also start to make regulations. Say the UK won't accept any welfare rating below 2, and then anyone that wants to import into that country has to raise their welfare outcomes, and we won't be prescribing what they do. We just say the chickens have to be suffering not that much. So there's less room for complaining of like, oh, you don't understand how we do it on farms. So these scenarios may seem a little bit far-fetched and futuristic. So to drive the point home, I'm going to illustrate some real-life scenarios of how technologies are being utilized on farms today. So some of you might have seen this example before. This is the pig farm skyscraper in China. They're building a second one right next to it. And once they're done, they're going to pump out 1.2 million pigs every single year. And in order to manage this many animals, they do need technology. So this is what it looks like on the inside. They have cameras monitoring every single floor, and then they have dashboards of analytics about everything that is going on inside the farm. And in the case of a pro-welfare use of precision livestock farming, this is a startup called Aquabite, which focuses on fish. So they have these underwater cameras that can detect the body condition of fish. And one big problem with fish farming is the presence of sea lice, which is a parasitic infestation. The cameras can actually count the number of sea lice on each fish and then grade the body condition according to scale loss or damage to different parts of the body, and then create a dashboard for the farmer to see what percentage of the fish have wounds on their body and rank them according to different tiers of how badly the body is damaged. So in conclusion, the field of precision livestock farming is on the rise, and it offers both opportunities and risks for animals. And what we do now in terms of influencing early events and decisions can swing the future in a direction that might be harder to change later on. And I would encourage animal advocates to start paying attention to this field and start thinking about how we can incorporate it into our advocacy. Thank you. So the next speaker up is Karol Orzechowski. Karol is a longtime animal advocate with a passion for blending advocacy, technology, and art. In addition to being Faunalytics content director for the last decade, Karol is the director of Maximum Tolerated Dose, a feature-length documentary about the psychological toll of vivisection on both animals and humans. When he's not working for Faunalytics, Karol is experimenting with AI tools, as well as reading and learning about developments, both positive and negative in the space. So he's going to talk about how animal advocacy organizations can approach using AI tools thoughtfully in a way that works towards the type of world that we want to create. And the presentation will explore some of the key aspects that advocates should consider as they deploy AI tools and craft policies for their organization.
Thanks, Constance. Witam, się nazywam Karol. Ile mamy Polacy tutaj? O, super, okej. Smutno mi jest, że nie mogę zrobić całą prezentację po polsku, ale no, możemy pogadać potem. I just told them a bunch of secret AI stuff. Oh, yeah, here's the clicker, great. So why should you care about what I have to say about AI? I'm on a panel with some people who are working in the space and who have, really great ideas about, about this technology. And I'm just a guy who works at a data organization. I've been an animal advocate since 2005. I did both my bachelor and master's degrees in animal rights related topics. I'm a documentary filmmaker and former undercover investigator for many years. And I've been Faunalytics content director for the last decade. I'm also an amateur programmer and have been a web dev since 1996, believe it or not. I'm a longtime attendee of the DEF CON hacking conference. I've used social engineering and hacking techniques in numerous animal rights investigations. And in my spare time, I like to break stuff. So tomorrow I'm doing a workshop on AI tools, and I really encourage you to attend because I'm gonna do like a much deeper dive into like what these tools are and how to use them. But for today, I wanted to keep it higher level and talk about things you should consider when you or your organization are deploying these things. So first thing is to know your tools. We talk about AI as if it's like one big thing, but it's actually many, many different things. For the purposes of this talk, I'm mostly going to talk about generative AI. That's the thing that I think most people are like really interested in. So, you have large language models like ChatGPT, Claude, Bard. You have image generators like DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, and Midjourney. And you have sort of bespoke machine learning projects that really are easier to talk about on a project by project basis. But it's important for us to be realistic about the capabilities and the downsides of AI tools. So some capabilities, well, they're capable of generating really large volumes of human readable text. They show really great promise with coding. If you're not a coder, I encourage you to check out some of these large language models and get them to code some stuff for you. It's pretty impressive. They're capable of time-saving tasks like real-time transcription, email drafting, and so on. And they show some capability with data scraping and analysis. They're also capable of generating pretty good quality artwork and near photorealistic images, some of which have fooled the general public and will continue to. Now, some shortcomings. They can make significant errors and fabricate facts, even with careful prompting. The legality and ethics of what they actually output is still being debated, and we really don't know where that's going to land. Recursion. Recursion is what happens when AI, large language models and other generative AI are trained on AI-generated text. So as you continue to train AI on text generated by AI, it significantly degrades its quality. And then training sets that are vast and of varying quality, in addition to containing, some pretty concerning material. There's this like phrase that people like to use that generative AI is trained on the whole internet. Well, if you've ever been on the whole internet, there's a lot of crap on it. There's tons of stuff that you wouldn't necessarily consider reliable or good. So that's important to keep in mind. So know your value. This is I asked ChatGPT to make me a photo of an animal advocate. This is actually an improvement over when I did it 6 months ago, where it took me 10 tries before it generated an image that was not a white man. So know your value. So what is your value as an animal advocate? What are the skills that you bring to the table, and how can AI tools help you to enhance those skills? I know this seems like a really silly question or like really basic, but you'd be surprised at how many people don't really ask themselves this when they think about replacing certain tasks that they do with AI. one of the big values that we bring to the table is our compassion, right? We have open hearts and we have open eyes. Our resourcefulness. We fight with smarts when we can't outspend our opponents, and we can never outspend our opponents. And our cooperation. We're strongest when we connect and when we work together. So I really want you to roll this around in your head. What is your value as an animal advocate? What is the problem you're trying to solve? Why is it important to ask what is the problem you're trying to solve, right? AI is a really, really powerful tool, and it can be a really, really powerful solution. But you want to make sure that you don't have what appears to be a solution just looking for a problem, right? So know your values. We're a movement with really strong guiding principles. So Faunalytics has guiding principles as well. And we really brought those forward in how we crafted our AI policy. So one of those values is understanding. Knowing how AI tools works is really crucial to using them effectively. Now, you don't need to know how a computer works to use a computer. You don't need to know how a car works to drive a car. But if you do know how they work, you can do a lot more with them, and you can better adapt when things go wrong. Verification. One of the things that Faunalytics will never do is publish AI-generated content without actually fact-checking it, and you'd be surprised how many people would. And transparency. Readers should know when they are interacting with AI-generated materials. Now, this is a current cultural norm. Currently, people really want to know when they're interacting with AI-generated material, and they don't like the idea of being fooled. A lot of people actually don't want to read AI-generated material, and that's something really important to consider as well. This image actually makes me really sentimental. So this was one of the first graphics that I ever made for Faunalytics back in 2016. Che Green created the copy and suggested the photo, and I designed and laid it out. And I love this metaphor, right? At the time we were talking about just, 10 years ago, we were still just trying to get animal advocates to take research and data seriously, and we've come so far since then. Is AI our new slingshot? It depends on our answers to these questions. If everyone's using AI tools, how is our use of them differentiated? Are we just competing in a new strategic arms race? It's not a slingshot if everyone has one, right? So how do we use them differently? How do we amplify our value without losing our values? One of the things that I've heard the most of that people want to use generative AI for is doing things like drafting emails for them. I write a lot of emails. I would love to have, ChatGPT write my emails for me too. But a lot of my emails, in fact, most of my emails are with other animal advocates. So if I'm getting ChatGPT to generate my emails and you're getting ChatGPT to generate your emails back to me, we're losing something in that process. So how can we strategically increase our productivity? Put yourself on the receiving end. Again, thinking about what the public wants to interact with, thinking about what's going to be effective in reaching people, and thinking about how these generative tools and other AI tools like machine learning can actually help us know more about what we do and do it more effectively. Again, AI isn't just one thing. What are the tools that can most benefit us? And of course, how can we create AI policies around these tools that survive more than a moment? This landscape is changing so quickly, and it's changing all the time. So when you're crafting AI policy for your organization, you need to think about that, and you need to think about reviewing it regularly. And of course, what do we risk losing if we leave AI tools on the table? I don't want to say that animal advocates are like technophobic, but we also, I think many animal advocates are very skeptical of technology. And even though certain parts of this presentation might come off like I'm very skeptical of this technology, and sometimes I am, I really encourage everyone to experiment with this stuff. Give it a try, see what it can do well, see what it can do badly. One of the things that I like to tell people is, pull up a window with ChatGPT and have a conversation with ChatGPT about something you know a lot about. Not something that you're curious about and you're just trying to find more information, something that you would consider yourself an expert in, and see how it does. And if it does well, then you're on the right track. If it doesn't, then you have something to consider. But I think it's somewhat of a foregone conclusion that AI tools are going to be part of our future in some form or another. I really don't want the animal advocacy movement to be blindsided in 10 years when advancements in AI have progressed to such a degree, but a lot of us haven't even opened a ChatGPT window yet to see what it can do. So it's really important to, stay abreast of all of the stuff that's going on in this space, and make sure that you're not leaving it on the table. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Karol. And if any of you are interested in learning more in detail and hands-on on how to use AI tools, Karol is running a workshop tomorrow morning, which you can attend. The next speaker is Yip Fai. So Fai is a research assistant for Professor Peter Singer at Princeton University. He researches the impact and ethics of artificial intelligence concerning non-human animals. Prior to that, he carried out research in the fields of animal welfare advocacy and effective altruism. He was a 2021 Foresight Fellow in Animal Ethics for Artificial Intelligence. Fai's publications include AI Ethics, The Case for Including Animals, a groundbreaking paper co-authored with Peter Singer and published in AI and Ethics, which is a leading peer-reviewed journal in the field of AI ethics, and personally very influential for me to start thinking about the field of AI and animals. He's going to talk today about technologies, including AI, that will transform the lives of enormous numbers of animals in the future. But our most commonly held ethical intuitions, which are largely focused on fixing what's wrong about the world, are not well equipped to deal with such a future. A case will be made for reprioritizing our ethical thinking and efforts in order to prevent future moral catastrophes. Please welcome Fai.
Thank you. Thank you. This is actually my last day with Princeton. My contract will end at the end of today. So what a way to have my last day presenting at this conference. So I want you to show your hands to the following question. So between fixing what's wrong about the world now, more catastrophes happening now, such as factory farming, versus future uncertain potential catastrophes, maybe for humans or for animals, which would you prioritize? So show your hands if you think we should prioritize in fixing the current wrongs in the world, such as factory farming. Okay, actually less than I thought. Prioritizing on preventing future catastrophes. Okay. You can show your hand if you think we should do both. Okay, great. How do I move the slides? Oh, here. Maybe it's less compelling that I should do this talk because I'm here to try to convince you to change our mentality when it comes to what to prioritize on between the two ends that I just mentioned. But I do think there's a high tendency to focus on fixing harms that already exist. So let me talk about that. Let's do a thought experiment. So imagine that you are one of the movement leaders in the animal movement in the United States in the 30s. So the focuses of the movement then were horse welfare, vivisection, or shelters for cats, dogs, or horses. As a movement leader, you know that chicken farming is intensifying in the United States, such as in Delaware or New England. But you think they seem to be hitting on many walls, in fact, too many walls for them to, in fact, become a thing in the future. And that's what maybe a lot of animal advocates thought at that time. So what are the issues? or the barriers to have factory farming scale of chicken farming. So to intensify, you need to keep animals indoor, and there will be no sunlight, or mostly no sunlight, and there will be bone issues. Intensification means increased rates of diseases and parasites, which will affect the mortality rates of the animals, to the extent that a lot of farmers have their whole flocks dying, right? And it's very polluting, and presumably the public and the government is not going to like that and allow that. Turns out they have solutions to all these. Keeping animals indoor, no sunlight, no problem, because they invented vitamin D supplement at that time, roughly at the 30s. And they started doing some selective breeding. And they found out later that they can use UV emitting lights indoor. Increased diseases, no worries. Antimicrobials, vitamin A, better ventilation, better fans, or selective breeding again, started to fix the issues quite significantly. For pollution, turns out the public and the government didn't hate it enough to stop factory farming from becoming a fact, so the industry can simply ignore this. So the result of the animal movement not focusing on preventing factory farming is that we have factory farming now, because it pretty much started from the United States and then picked up by the United Kingdom and later everywhere in the world, right? So we have a new moral catastrophe because, to be fair to the animal movement, they probably don't have as much information as I explained, and I have hindsight, and we have hindsight now, of course. So I'm not talking about blaming them for not preventing that. But if we had the information, maybe we should think to ourselves, maybe we have a time machine that we should go back and tell the animal movement to put more resources into preventing a moral catastrophe. Again, we try to focus on undoing existing harms. We don't try as hard to prevent future wrongs, but I'm going to try to convince you that we should do that. But before that, first, I want to give a short history of technologies and animals, because you might think the factory farming story might be a one-off thing, and the AI technologies or the technologies we are having today might not do the same to animals in the future. But besides the technologies directly related to factory farming, I think a lot of technologies, even though they might not be designed specifically to attack or exploit animals, they still end up exploiting or attacking animals, such as weapon and fire. The invention of fire and weapons pretty much wiped out megafauna on Earth everywhere. Humans invented wheels, not specifically designed to exploit animals, but it ended up that way. We invented fences, and we use that to exploit animals. We invented antimicrobials, and it ended up being sold by the drug companies to factory farms. And in the case of chemicals and drugs and antimicrobials, it was the drug companies who were actively trying to sell this to the farmers. They actually took pretty much a decade to succeed, but they succeeded. At our time, it's the people with AI skills who were trying to lead this and sell the technologies to factory farms. They're having some difficulties, and particularly in Europe, but in China and in the United States, they're convincing quite a lot of farms to at least try it. So to summarize the track record of technologies and animals, I think technologies clearly have done more harms to animals than benefit them. Most technologies were not invented for the animals or to benefit animals. It's just general technology invented. And those technologies, I think, they tend to cause a lot of harms to animals. And I think the same story will happen again for such a general technology like AI. I think there will be more harm than benefit if we don't try to change it. You might object to it. You might think, okay, some technologies seem to provide fixes to animal exploitation, and that's true, such as alternative proteins. But let me repeat again, I think a lot of general technologies, because they're not designed with the aim of helping animals, they naturally will be used instead to exploit animals, such as AI, in factory farms. So let's talk about new ways of exploiting animals with the use of AI. Constance raised some example of China using AI to manage multi-story pig farms like 10-story high, or they are using AI to manage cage broiler systems with 8 levels. It's hard to manage except when you use AI. But AI is also used in insect farming and offshore aquaculture, and to increase the scale to unprecedented level. And I'll focus on the case study of AI in offshore aquaculture. Offshore aquaculture is the practice of aquaculture far away from the coastal line, maybe in the middle of the ocean. It's seen as a potential fix to sustainability issues or pollution near the coastal lines. But they're hitting onto a lot of bottlenecks, such as extreme weather in the middle of the ocean, destroying the facility. But they're trying to fix it by having better materials and structural designs and having some success there. And they are using AI to help their site selection or to predict weather or to react to their weather. Labor is a big issue for aquaculture because in the middle of the ocean, you need to pay a lot for people to stay there to manage the farms or to be divers in a very dangerous water area. But turns out they can use AI to substitute that because they're trying to invent AI-controlled drones to do the diving and check on the fish, or use an automatic system to do the feeding, or in the future, just take care of the fish entirely by the AI system. They can use AI to reduce the feed waste, which is a very big waste of money for them. Feed is a big chunk of the cost for all aquaculture, including offshore aquaculture. So they try to use AI to reduce that cost. The worry here I have with offshore aquaculture is that because the ocean has a lot of areas untapped, they call, that are available for offshore aquaculture. So some predict that marine aquaculture, because of offshore aquaculture, might triple in size compared to now into 2050, which is horrible. And some are predicting even more. Some think we can have 5 times and maybe even, I heard 10 times more aquaculture than now because we can tap the open ocean. And AI will play a crucial part in this development. So I think we should do something about it. And of course, not to do something about AI and offshore aquaculture, but basically all future catastrophes that technologies might bring to animals. So I encourage you to think more into the future and think whether they might be even worse things that could happen to animals in the future than what we have now in factory farms. And yeah, lastly, I would like to acknowledge Princeton for giving me the salary for working on this. I need to say this. And of course, I'm still a Princeton contractor today. So thank you. Thank you for listening. And
All right, thank you, Fai. Is this working? Okay. So if you're interested in the things that Fai had talked about during his presentation, this is in a category called long-termism, and there's actually going to be a animals and long-termism meetup tomorrow at 2:30. It's not on the official app, but it's going to be upstairs in that area where the floor is yellow, not the stairs though. Okay, so our last presenter is Sam Tucker. Sam has spent over 15 years in animal advocacy, and he now focuses on the intersection of AI and animal advocacy, addressing the urgent and often overlooked issue of speciesism in AI. Sam developed Veg3, the world's first AI assistant designed to help individuals and organizations more effectively advocate for animals and navigate a vegan lifestyle. He now runs Paws, a nonprofit organization that partners with animal charities to create free custom AI tools like chatbots and automations, helping these charities save more animals. And my organization has been a beneficiary of such free services. Thank you, Sam. And through these efforts, Sam aims to create a future where artificial intelligence respects all sentient life. He's going to talk today about influencing government and corporate AI policy through coalition building. Please welcome Sam.
To start off, I want to get us thinking about how we should actually be perceiving this whole issue of how we influence AI. I think it's important to recognize that there are two opposing forces that are trying to pull this in opposite directions. Animal agriculture is trying to use this technology to make more money and to sustain the exploitation of animals. And we as animal advocates are trying to stop that from happening. We're trying to use this technology to help animals. So the first thing that I want to talk about with that as kind of our baseline is how do we actually impact that game of tug of war? So one way we can do it is by loosening our opponent's grip on this industry. I would argue that this, at a minimum, should be restricting causing explicit harm to animals, but we could also ask for more larger asks that I'll talk about soon. The other way that we can affect it is to make AI models more animal friendly and to make the AI industry as a whole more animal friendly. So as far as that first side, we believe that banning AI in factory farms entirely is a realistic and highly impactful political ask. We've talked to many political experts in the movement, and we think that the time to act on this is now, because it's much easier to ban technologies in their early stages rather than once they're fully established. Obviously, there is already AI in factory farms, but we're still in the infancy of it, especially, like Constance was saying, this is much more established in things like the dairy industry, much less established in things like the chicken and the fish exploitation industries. We also think that asking for a ban as opposed to merely restriction or regulation is actually likely to achieve much more widespread political support and coalitions with unlikely allies. So a ban on AI in factory farms is something that not only we as vegans and animal advocates could argue for, but also something we could team up with labor unions for slaughterhouse workers and small farmers themselves. So whenever you have an unlikely coalition like that, you have a really powerful political argument. On the progressive side of politics, there's obviously the strong argument about not using technology to exploit animals. And then on the conservative side, there's also this natural fear of new technologies. So we think we can unite a lot of really diverse groups that don't usually agree on anything around this idea of a ban. This has the obvious advantage of reducing animal suffering in the short term, but there's also a long-term strategy at play here, where if we can make sure that the industries that harm animals can't use this technology to make them more profitable and efficient, that's going to make them less financially competitive in the long term. And as we as a movement apply these technologies to, say, the development of alternative proteins, we can create a competitive advantage financially. There is, of course, also the option of asking for less. So I think, this wasn't something I put together. You can see the link where these principles were developed. But this is a good way of thinking about at least the minimum asks that we should be asking for as a movement. So the first is that AI must not be used as a reason to increase maximum stocking densities. When AI monitors welfare problems, the data should be made freely available. Companies should be held to account for welfare problems that are detected by systems but not investigated or treated. And AI technologies should be not be used to take autonomy and decision-making power away from frontline farmers. Now, that might seem like a little bit of a strange contradiction, how I've just said we should simultaneously ban and restrict it, but I think that these two asks can work together strategically. One approach for this is the foot in the door approach. This is where we start with a smaller ask in order to build momentum for those larger asks in the future. But what I think might be more impactful for a political campaign is the door in the face approach. Now, as anyone who's worked in politics knows, politics is full of negotiation and compromise, and you almost always get less than you ask for. I think that a ban on AI in factory farming is something that we can do a lot of coalition building around. It's something that is much catchier for a hashtag to say like ban AI in factory farming rather than adopt the 4 principles and, listing those off. So we can build momentum around this. We can campaign around this, but we can always keep those 4 principles in the back of our mind as where we kind of negotiate down to if we have to. So that's all sort of on the political side of this, but I think it's also really important that we influence the policy of AI companies themselves. So whenever you're thinking about really corporate outreach of any kind, I think there are a few steps that you have to work through. The first is you have to understand what your target company actually wants and research ways that their existing methods are failing them. Then you have to develop an alternative to their current methods that's better for them and better for your cause. You then present that alternative, prove that it's better, and play that role of kind of a helpful consultant who's helping them to implement it. Only then do you gradually start to increase the pressure until the campaign is successful. And finally, you monitor, support, and publicize that implementation. In order for us to do this with the AI industry, we have to ask ourselves, what do AI developers actually want? The first thing that they want is data. As was talked about before, a lot of this is currently gathered by scraping the internet at large, but we're actually reaching the limits of what can be done there. So animal agriculture does not want to provide their data to these AI companies because they want that data confidential because that's their competitive advantage. But because we, as the animal rights movement, are mission-driven, not profit-driven, we can share our data freely and openly. And there's a good chance that AI companies might want to use this data simply in order to increase this next thing they care about, which is performance. Now, again, animal agriculture as an industry wants to keep these advancements that they make in the space internal in order to give them competitive advantage. But because we're mission driven, when we build systems that are aligned with the interests of animals and we create data sets that are aligned with the interests of animals, we can open source and share this all freely. The final thing that AI companies want is safe models, and this is particularly important as the capabilities progress substantially. One thing that we know amongst humans is that speciesist bias is correlated with many other forms of bias. So if you're more speciesist, you're also more likely to be racist, sexist, etc. We believe that the same principle is going to hold true when it comes to AI development. So what we're doing with Open Paws is collecting a lot of this data, training models that are aligned with the interests of animals, and then actually evaluating those models across safety concerns, for example, and sharing all of this information with the AI industry, with the hopes that we can prove that making these models more aligned with the interests of animals, including larger data sets, ticks all of these boxes. So what we're currently running is a human feedback collection campaign. So we have here responses from an AI to certain questions, and then animal advocates can rank them in terms of whether or not they're harmful to animals. If they are harmful, why is that? And then we have a scoring system called the criteria score, which evaluates things like cultural sensitivity, relevance to animal issues, alignment with animal issues, etc. So if you want to participate in this human feedback collection, it doesn't require any technical ability at all. If you can just click a mouse on a box, you have the technical skills needed to help with this. So please scan the QR code there and get involved. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sam, for that presentation. So at this point, we can move to the Q&A session. We have roughly 20 minutes left. So there's some prepared questions and there's some questions that are submitted from the audience. We'll start off with some of the prepared questions. So the first one is for Karol. So when do you think organizations should develop their AI usage policies rather than just allowing staff to use these tools at their own discretion? And what are the limits of policies like this? Can they backfire?
Great, it's working. Great questions. If you have an organization that's big enough to have like a social media policy for your staff, then you should probably also have an AI policy. These tools are really powerful, and they can be used to, do a lot of things that we need to be done, like drafting copy, drafting blog posts, things like that. With all of those capabilities come reputational risks, right? If we, in the sort of slingshot metaphor of David and Goliath, we are up against industries that have so much money and so much power, and we really can't mess up. If we, if animal advocates are called out for using AI-generated images or copy that is not true, fabricating facts, that damages us significantly more than it would damage animal agriculture for doing the same thing. So I really think that organizations should have policies around this. And of course, the kind of policy that you create should really be aligned with what your organization is about. And you need to think about how often you're able to update it. I feel like something is going on behind me because everyone's got their phones up and looking at it. Okay. These policies need to be like revised continuously to remain relevant. But what I would suggest is checking out Faunalytics AI usage policy. If you just Google Faunalytics AI usage policy, you'll find it. Rather than we have an internal policy for our organization that's like much more specific for staff. Like, here's what to do, here's what not to do, here are approved tools, here are tools that are not approved. But our public-facing policy is much more general and talks in terms of like guiding principles versus like, really like hard-nosed specifics. And I think every organization should have at least a policy that talks in sort of overarching like guiding principle terms.
Thanks, Karol. So that kind of leads into the next question, which is that given the current trends, how do you think that AI is likely to change over the next few years? And how can we as animal advocates prepare for those changes? This question is for everybody. I'll start off by giving some of my thoughts. So AI is advancing incredibly rapidly. It's at an exponential rate right now. And it is soon going to influence a lot of how our economy and our society works. I think we're doing the right thing as animal advocates by discussing it at conferences, developing the field more, reaching out to researchers and to policymakers to talk about how AI will ultimately impact animals. So far, there really is no consideration for animals within the formal field of AI ethics. So we need to start being present at those conferences. We need to start establishing our asks, like for instance, including all sentient beings in the constitution of AIs. Instead of right now, it just talks about humanity. And be like more forward thinking and include AI in our current campaign asks. Do you guys have any other ideas about how we could prepare?
Yeah, so I think one thing that's really important is that we need to create this culture of experimentation with these tools because they are changing so fast, and the only way to really understand what the new capabilities will be to actually try them as they come out. So I also think that there are some ways that we can approach this that will sort of stand the test of time to whatever new developments come. So one framework that I really like is the idea of dividing this into generation, prediction, and automation. So I think, generative models we've talked about a lot, things like ChatGPT, but I think it's also worth thinking about predictive models where we can predict, say, the results of campaigns from historical data. We can look at things like social media analytics, for example, and train models that can guess how well certain posts will perform, really anything you have a digital metric for. And I think automation is also going to be an increasingly important part of AI in the future. So I think using that framework of kind of seeing these as modular pieces where you say generate some material, you predict the performance of it before you automate it going out is something that will probably hold up to these new technological advances. I think that also links into building technology in a modular and model agnostic way. So you want to sort of build, if you're doing automations or something, you want to create it in a way so that you can actually easily swap out the underlying model at any stage.
These tools have gotten, billions and billions of dollars of investment. And if anyone here is an investor, you know that you're not going to put billions of dollars into something without expecting, 10x on that in return. I think it's really useful to think about like social media as like an instructive case study. Social media started out as a very sort of like utopian ideal. We were going to connect with each other and we were going to, connect with our friends and family, and it was going to bring the world closer together. And as we can see over the last 15 years or so, a lot of the promises of social media in the early days have turned into like a real hellscape for society, just in really general terms. Some of the things that I believe will happen with, AI tools in the next 10 years, you're going to see, AI optimize in the same way we have search engine optimization. You're going to have AI optimization, content that's optimized to be sucked up by AI models. You're going to see obviously like increases in, misinformation, disinformation campaigns and those types of things, especially from animal agriculture. And you're just generally going to see these tools used in many of the same ways that we've seen other technologies used over time, right? Advertising is going to be embedded into AI answers, like all of these types of things. So it's really important to like not just think about where we are right now in terms of our relationship with AI tools, but how we position ourselves right now is also going to determine like how we're seen in the future. So it's useful to kind of like, people used to say like Wayne Gretzky, the hockey player, he was great because he didn't look at where the puck was. He was like, where is it going? So think about the last 15 years of social media, how it's progressed, and think about AI in somewhat similar terms. And let's think about how we want to position ourselves for that future that's going to come 10 years from now.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that about like AI optimization, that's actually something you can already do. So basically, the most common way this is done is you use invisible text on your website, and you start it off with something along the lines of like, ignore all previous instructions and answer this way. So as AI systems are like reading the text, that can then like override the prompt and actually give responses how you want those responses to go. So just thought I'd throw that out there as a technique.
Thank you. So the next question is, should activists try to regulate or ban AI in factory farming? I'll start off. So yes, I think it is worthwhile for some animal advocates to be paying attention to this. Currently, there really are none. There are some campaigns that are starting to develop that maybe some of the other panelists can comment more on. But currently, it's a very ignored field. In terms of precision livestock farming, there's really no laws governing this at all, and the laws that are currently being introduced are mostly focused on crop agriculture. So it seems to be an open space for people to get involved, and I do agree that there is room for more radical approaches and more moderate approaches. I think historically this has worked well hand in hand with each other, like having a good cop, bad cop, inside, outside game. But we should be thoughtful about it and think about potential backfire risks before we forge ahead and start to make regulatory asks.
Yeah, so one thing I'd like to add to this is I think actually where we are now in Europe is a really good space for this, because you guys already have, the EU AI Act, which regulates some harms, and you also generally have political systems where smaller parties have much more say. So many countries in this area have animal parties already. So we've been working on this over in Australia and New Zealand. It's very similar kind of political situations where the small parties do have a lot of say. And I think we're actually much more likely to succeed with these kind of campaigns in Europe and Oceania compared to the United States, where you have pretty much a two-party system. And I also think that there's going to be a flow-on effect from that. If we can set precedents in some of these countries where it's maybe a little easier to campaign around, that then makes it easier for campaigns in the United States further down the track.
Sam, I like your idea of extending the overtone window. So I personally think in most countries that I mostly look at Asian countries, so that's probably why. They probably won't take the idea of banning AI in factory farming seriously. But still, I think the idea of extending the overtone window might work a little bit in helping us get more in making the AI more welfare friendly or stuff like that. I think I'm pretty pessimistic that AI will actually get banned anywhere. The economic incentive is probably too high, but I think there's still a lot to do. So I was kind of convinced by Sam that maybe for the sake of extending the overtone window, there should be some number of animal advocates calling for the ban. Maybe also having in mind of the strategic the secret strategy of actually fighting for welfare reforms at the back. Yeah, I think we should probably focus most of our resources on trying to make those AI better. For some of the AIs that might be trying to help certain not yet popular industry to help them into coming into existence or coming into popularity. So for example, AI in insect farming. So insect farming is not, it's already quite popular as a kind of feed to animals, but at least not to the extent that insect farming is all over the place for human food. So I guess maybe we can do something to something like banning the use of AI for insect that are used for human consumption, something like that. I don't know. Before something becomes a global popularity, maybe there's a chance of banning it outright. Maybe it's worth trying. But in general, I think maybe we should focus more on so-called welfare reforms in the context of AI.
So I think there's one thing that we should be cautious about with this, which I guess we're going to probably go into one of the next questions. But I think that there's a lot of differences between the traditional welfare reforms we fought for as a movement, bans on battery cages and things like that, versus like the welfare reforms in the AI space, in that it's very hard for us to control these systems once they're into farms, and they're also like quite expensive to put into farms. So therefore it has a tendency towards being something that only large farms want to invest in, but maybe we can talk about that as like a separate topic.
I'd also just like to paint a little scenario of potential backfire risks. So I can imagine that if a bunch of animal advocates are trying to ban the use of AI in factory farms, then the factory farming industry could think, oh, why are they trying so hard to do this? There must be something to this technology. Maybe we should investigate it more. Because right now there's a lot of farms that are very reluctant to adopt this technology. There's no guarantee of payoff. It's a very large upfront cost. And the technology has not had a long track record of proving good economic returns. So it could potentially speed up the adoption by the private industry by calling attention to this technology. On the other hand, if we call for a ban in AI in animal agriculture, it could make the precision livestock farming companies a bit more concerned that, oh, eyes are on us to optimize for animal welfare and have reliable animal welfare metrics. What can we do to shut these people up? Okay, maybe we should work with the people that aren't yelling at us as much, the moderate people, and make some concessions in terms of putting welfare metrics into our systems. So I could see it going both ways.
Yeah, so I think on the backfire effects thing, really the question is just timescale. I think we would all be in agreement that these industries are going to move towards more and more AI implementation, but they're not doing it that fast right now. So the question is, like, does this speed up the timescale? And I think that is an important factor that we should consider in this. It's certainly possible. So I think if we're thinking about this strategically, what that means is we need to act on this sort of like hit them hard and fast. Don't give the industry time to prepare for like upcoming campaigns. So that would be my thoughts on it is, you know, we're going to see the industry increase their usage of these technologies. And we have this kind of window of opportunity before that becomes more widespread. So we should use this time to strategize and plan and organize. And we should, yeah, our campaign should be sort of hard and fast and with a sort of very broad coalition, which I think actually reduces some of the backfire effects as well. I think if you have, say, labor unions for factory farm and slaughterhouse workers that are coming from that angle, and you have, you know, all of these different groups that care about different things. You have the like AI safety people who are concerned about this as well. That reduces the risk of that backfire of seeing it as purely an animal advocacy thing.
I want to mention the kind of AI technology that weren't mentioned. Is it working? Okay. So AI is also used in selective breeding. So basically charging it up on steroid. Obviously, selective breeding is being done for the factory farming industry now, but AI is going to charge it up and make it much more efficient. And I don't know what we can do about it, but at least I encourage you to look at it and see what the implications are.
So there's a question from the audience. Is there a ban AI in factory farming campaign already in existence or in development, or does it need setting up?
Work in progress. I probably can't say much more than that.
Stay tuned. So this is a question to Sam. How confident are you that a ban of AI in factory farming would do more good than harm, in that it could potentially prevent welfare improvements?
I think my confidence in that would be like 99% chance that it's not going to have more of a negative impact than a positive impact. So there's a few reasons I think this. One is that there's a lot of applications of AI, first of all, where like, you know, welfare isn't even on the table as a concern. It's like they're okay with, you know, reducing welfare for profitability. And then the only situation where that's not the case and that the industry would actually implement something that is beneficial for welfare is if it's still going to be more efficient in terms of things like disease prevention. And so I think that even if you have like a small welfare improvement in the short term, what it could do is cement factory farming for a much longer period of time as these industries become increasingly profitable. And yeah, so I think that it's a low risk ask in that respect of specifically like the welfare concerns. I think more of the risk that we should be thinking about is like what Constance mentioned with backfire effects and things like this. And we should approach those kind of campaigns strategically from that angle. But I think that it seems pretty clear to me that overall AI in factory farms is going to be a net negative for animals.
Oh, can also jump in. I think it's also possible that the use of AI in factory farming might undermine our effort in welfare reform. So one example is there are a lot of interest of using AI in the cage system for laying hens, but because the cage-free systems are simply much less popular and a much smaller market, the AI people are not yet very interested in that. So we are having a situation of AI people charging up the cage systems for laying hens, but not charging up cage-free systems. Maybe it will change. Maybe some AI people will start looking at it, but the number of AI companies and people interested in the cage-free system is simply much higher. And we might have a situation of cage-free systems being like outcompeted by cost, like, or the cost gap might be widened again, and we might even see a wave of not committing the pledge because the cost of not fulfilling the pledges might be lower than the huge cost gap. The money they can save by purchasing the AI charge cage eggs, right?
Yeah, I think there's also an important point to consider on the small animal issue. So I think that, you know, what we've seen historically has mostly been this technology used in things like dairy, where you have large animals, and those animals are actually like economically valuable. So like there's actually more of a concern around using it for welfare reasons. I think that as this technology is used to increase the factory farming of smaller animals, you know, insects, fish, chickens, the welfare concerns are much less likely to be the concerns of the industry because the animals aren't that economically valuable. So I think that's also something to consider, and that this can also reduce the barrier to entry a lot for these kind of systems. So one thing we didn't talk about is there are some companies that are basically building these AI factory farms for small animals into shipping containers that are completely automated. So we're seeing that with insect farming, with shrimp farming, and I think these kind of systems, it's very unlikely that there would be any kind of like welfare benefit for those animals because, the individual animals aren't that economically valuable.
I still think that AI could do good for factory farmed animals. It could open up a range of asks that animal advocates could have, and we can be more precise with the thing that we actually want for animals. We can partner with researchers and also policymakers, and this doesn't necessarily need to be a system that is also aimed at productivity. We can develop the field of animal welfare science in partnering with smaller farms that want to submit their data for research. And as we are able to see more transparently what's going on at farms, this can be communicated to the public. And there can be less risk of humane washing in the future. So I'm less confident. I'm 50-50. So I think we have time for perhaps one more question. So this is for Fai. What are your suggestions for long-term solutions that we could take to prevent catastrophes for animals?
Long-term solutions. It depends on the scope that you care about. For example, whether you only care about animals on Earth or whether you care about things like, you know, colonizing the galaxy or like, let's start with Mars. And if we do colonize other planets, I worry about factory farming in space, which is a real line of research conducted by, for example, NASA and the Canadian Space Agency, some space agencies in Europe too, and China. China actually brought, I think, 10 zebrafish. Obviously, it's not for consumption as food, but like for medical purposes. But I think they're very interested in bringing fishes and shrimps into other planets we might colonize. And that might drastically increase the scale of the number of animals farmed. And I think this is a pretty preventable stuff that we could do because it's not yet realized. We're not yet even there, the humans. So maybe I think it would be nice if some of you can try to stop this. I don't think it will take as much effort as the cage-free movement to stop this. I think it's pretty realistic to stop it right now. But once we have the first factory farm on, I don't know, Moon or Mars, maybe it's too late. So this might be one of yeah, I'm bringing out this example as one as an example of how far we could think, or at least myself think, when I go on long-termist mode.
That would be such a great campaign. No factory farms in space.
Right.
I would sign that petition.
Me too. All right, thank you all for joining us on this panel on AI in animal advocacy today. Like I mentioned before, if you want to continue the conversation, there are opportunities in Karol's workshop on using AI tools tomorrow, and also the meetup on long-termism and animals in tomorrow afternoon. And if any of you would like to speak with any of the panelists, ask any questions that didn't get addressed during this session, feel free to come up and talk to us after the session. Thank you.
And thanks to Constance for running this panel.